Again, this isn't just something you go buy, turn on, walk away. You've got to have the process around it.
That it's a tool, or that it doesn't require the traditional hard work to be done, that managing up, down, and sideways inside the organization, and crossing business and organizational and technical boundaries, and actually creating some unification of those processes and capabilities based on what's important to the business. Gartner did a great thing by creating this structured, some call it a framework, some call it a process model, whatever it is. It is a way that to look at across organizational and technology boundaries to try to unify and bring better cohesive nature to your investments and your understanding of risk in your environment. Unfortunately, the market texture and the vendor landscape, typically with these types of processes, and I'll use zero trust as another example, they tend to, glom onto this framework model, or really a program that needs to be established in order to manage risk, and aim to sell you more tools into your tech stack. And so it isn't that there isn't additional functionality that's developing and new tools that are emerging to aid in this, but it still requires the footwork up front to build that business plan, the processes, and all the structure alongside investing in the right technologies in that regard.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. It is a CTEM. Look, the tool is part of it, but you've got to use, and you got to have a process to do something with it. It's not going to fix everything. If I'm still looking for that magic silver bullet. If I buy something and it's just magic, I turn it on and it just fixes things, it finds them, and I'm like, that doesn't exist. It isn't. Again, this isn't just something you go buy, turn on, walk away. You've got to have the process around it. It all starts at the visibility side, and we talk about anything in security, like we all start, like where we begin, it begins in visibility. Then from visibility that you get, it's like, what are the actions, what are the steps, what are the things you take or do in order to protect, whether that's patch, whether it's you have a compensating control, whether if it's bad enough, you get to the point of something where it's too big of a risk that maybe that system doesn't stay out on the internet, or has to be put in a more isolated way, or other controls put on it, i.e. you got to go through proxies. I know we've done where as we found things, as we have a continuous kind of program, found a system that needed to be on the internet but had web vulnerabilities that weren't easy to fix. So it's like, well, what do you do? It's like you take it offline. Well, no, we have customers who need to access it. Do you just leave it? Well, if this gets breached, we're going to have a bigger problem. So what do you do? Like, put obviously like a proxy system in place from it. So a little bit of the, person trap that, people have to go through in order to get to it. But this is where, like, CTEM and all these things, it'll expose these things to you, and then you can make decisions on what do you do, and from a risk perspective. But it's an informational tool, and you still have to have a process to do something with it. The same, I've talked to companies who, you see the ones that get breached. Oh, well, we turned on this endpoint thing or that. I'm like, great, but then there were a bunch of alerts and a bunch of issues that you didn't do anything with, and you thought that I just turned this on, it was just automatic protection, shields up, and walk away. Like, that's not this. The other thing I hear a lot of times is, again, I think people are like, well, this is a complete replacement for like external pen testing. I don't think it's a complete replacement. I think you can do some things, with it. I think it can help, and it becomes one of those things as part of the external penetration process. Again, things that you can do continually. You can have your external penetration processes link in with some of these things and some of this data and stuff like that. And again, maybe make some of the processes where you now bring the human, I'll call it the human in the loop, sort of thing, in a little bit more regularly, a little bit more consistency, versus you show up once a year, somebody does a test, you walk away. How, again, does this stuff happen on a continual basis is where we need to, and every organization needs to move to from a cybersecurity perspective.
I agree. And the technology, computers, Digitization's been helping us do this better and better for years. We have to continue to let computers do what computers are really good at, and let humans do what humans are really good at. And it's not a replacement of one or the other. It's about optimizing your environment, and so that we can keep up with what everyone's doing in terms of leveraging AI or whatever advancements to run their business and be more effective and productive.
One of the interesting things when you look at like CTEM and stuff is, and I think some people go and it's like, well, I'm already doing vulnerability scanning. I've got somebody doing pen testing. I got somebody, this, that, whatever. Why yet another thing? Now, I would even challenge that. I'm like, you can actually change a bit of what you're doing and like rethink about the whole thing and rethink about vulnerability management as a whole. And that's a little bit what we've done, where we said, okay, you're doing these things, you have these internal systems, then you have some obviously in systems that you're running that are externally facing, and then you've got like pen testing. And I think what you really need to do is like look at what are all the investments in services, in varying other tools, and look at the other data sources that you have vulnerability data. A lot of tools, Microsoft, I will bring them up, like Defender, you can produce quite a bit of vulnerability data from it that doesn't always necessarily need another scanner. So how do you look at that and say, okay, you need to have a more continual program and say, what isn't helping with that? What is? And I think this is not just, yes, add another slice of pie to the plate and stuff like that, and another cost expense. I think some of it's reworking your program and saying what needs to be going on continually and be more regular. What needs to be point in time assessments where you have, again, human in the loop. I'll use that term again, like those sorts of things. And that's where I think CTEM, it's too much of everybody's like, oh, I'm just adding it in. I took the other way. Like we got rid of some things we didn't think were adding value and reworked our program based on data sources, based on, a continuous, exposure management, from externally, taking internal vulnerability data and trying to bring that all together into one picture. Because at the end of the day, whether it's on the internet, whether you're running it or the things like that, you're still talking about identifying vulnerabilities and issues, configuration sorts of things, and remediating them, whether they're internal or external or wherever. So how, instead of fragmented, do you try to bring that together into one view? And I think that's where, again, CTEM and others, like it's thinking about how you evolve your program, not just buy something else. And that's sometimes a little bit tough, to be, well, we've had our warm blanket for years of, pen testing and this and that and all these certain things. But I'm like, you're going to have to evolve because, again, AI and the threat actors and the things like that, these things are evolving at a speed that it's going to be very, very hard to keep up with.
One of the things, and I'm glad you brought up, Erik, the point about needing to re-architect. It's not just about adding another tool or doing another thing. One of the things that we hear from our customers and just in the industry, this is not a new problem, but the last thing anyone wants is more visibility of something that they can't do anything about, especially without having the ability to prioritize it in a meaningful way, because there's always plenty to fix, and just adding something else that gives you another thing to identify something else to fix is not necessarily on its own that helpful. And, for IT teams that are already burdened with too much to do, the last thing they want someone to do is sell them a tool or a process or a capability that will give them more to do that, that they're going to struggle to keep up with. Which means then, re-architecting, reimagining, rethinking, and even, to some degree, reinvesting in things that can aid in that remediation cycle, because that is continuously and will continuously be the bottleneck and the hard part of the equation of identifying things, still have to fix them. And so this is where I think there's a lot of opportunity through partners and capabilities to look at ways to improve the environment in such a way that you can do different things that get you better bang for the buck in terms of remediation activity. Having 1,000 servers to patch versus being able to build have some different network architecture that takes some things out of play, where the same degree of risk changes by thinking differently besides just patch more config more, do more in that regard. And so I do think it does take a little bit of a reshift in the way of thinking about how remediation is done to get the benefit of keeping up with, because not having visibility is never the right answer. I don't want to close my eyes and not see what's out there because I can't do anything about it. Said, no CISO ever, or no, CISO would ever want to hear from their IT partners. At the end of the day, figuring out how to remediate and think about things differently in that regard is very important. I appreciate the way that you guys have thought about that, Eric.